The strike is not going to accomplish anything useful. It is not our problem. It is very expensive, and it's dangerous. I don't think that their president or Nancy Pelosi or John Boehner has rebutted any of those points in any significant way.
So you don't think, Nancy Pelosi spoke of the Balkans, for instance, in the 90s. You don't think there's a humanitarian imperative here? 100,000 dead, many more wounded, 10% of an entire country made to be refugees. You don't think the U.S. has a role to play in alleviating suffering on this scale at all?
Oh, yes, I do. And I would support humanitarian aid to the 2 million refugees in Jordan and, and in Turkey. But there's no such thing that I'm aware of a humanitarian bomb or humanitarian missile attack. And in no way does such an attack relieve the suffering of the dead or the refugees or anyone else. It will be ineffective. A missile attack that we launch against Syria will not lead to regime change. It will not prevent the use of chemical weapons in the future. It won't do anything except make us feel that perhaps we've done something in a circumstance that seems to require some action. But it's often the case, under the law of unintended consequences, that what you do turns out to have unintended consequences. That's very much the case here.
What would justify military intervention by the U.S. in the Syria crisis, in your opinion?
Very little, but if there were genocide, then I would say that it's justifiable.
Some already are calling what's going on in some parts of the country ethnic cleansing and genocide, but you disagree?
Well, what's actually happening is a civil war, one of roughly a dozen civil wars all around the world. The Burmese Civil War started 10 years before I was born. It's killed far, far more people than the Syrian Civil War has killed, and yet 12 different presidents have resisted the temptation to involve America in it. We are not the world's policeman. We're not the world's judge, jury, or executioner. This is not our responsibility.
So what Nancy Pelosi said is having no impact on your decision to vote against military action?
What would have an impact on my decision to vote would be if someone explained what this has to do with us. The English clearly understand that it doesn't have anything to do with them. And as you just pointed out, the overwhelming sentiment, not only in the United States but around the world, is that some things are better left off on their own. We've started a petition at the website Don't Attack Syria that in very short order has attracted over 20,000 signatures from Americans who are concerned that rather than dealing with our own problems, our problems in health care and jobs, the economy, housing, education, instead we're being diverted from that in some kind of misguided sense that we can do something useful 6,000 miles from our shores. It happened in Iraq. It happened in Afghanistan. It happened in Vietnam. And I would think that by now we should have learned those lessons. Those lessons are far more pertinent to this experience than the Balkans or Neville Chamberlain or any other historical analogies that are being dredged up by the proponents of this action.
Have you had any conversations with any other of your colleagues on, I know you're in recess right now in your home district, but have you had any conversations, anybody trying to convince you to change your vote, or is that far off into the future when you get back to D.C.?
Well, what I'm hearing from other colleagues is that many people are intending, like me, to vote against this resolution. Members of Congress, at least in the House of Representatives, tend to vote their districts. And the sentiment all around the country is the same on this point. People scratch their heads and say, what does this have to do with us? Why isn't the United Nations doing something about this? Why isn't the Arab League doing something about this? There are 196 countries in the world. Why would this burden fall on the United States and the United States alone? The current estimates are that the attack that's being contemplated will cost $1 billion. $1 billion with a B. I think that my constituents in Central Florida and other people's constituents are saying to themselves, that's money that's better spent on our health, on our housing, on jobs, and so on. And that's a common sense argument that nobody in the administration, and neither John Boehner nor Nancy Pelosi, has made any effort to refute.
Just one last question. If your constituents, for instance, indicated to you that in their majority they believe that a strike on Syria to punish a regime that the White House says gassed its own people is the right thing to do. Let's say a majority of your constituents tell you that. Would you then change your vote?
I might, but listen, my constituents have their heads on straight. They don't listen to the beat of the war drums. They're interested in their jobs, their health care, their housing, the things that they have to deal with in their everyday lives. And they don't have these high-flown discussions about abstract concepts the way that people seem to have in Washington, D.C., or for that matter in the mainstream media. And those people are never going to feel that this is justifiable, that it's a good way to spend $1 billion. And you know what? They're right.